I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and here at our test track today, I've got the Nissan Qashqai. Now, last time I reviewed the Qashqai was when this new generation came out at the end of last year, and that was a TI, which is pretty expensive. Today I've gone from the second from the bottom. This is a Qashqai ST Plus, which in a lot of ways looks like a Goldilocks spec. It's 41.5 grand drive away, which in 2023 isn't even too bad for a small SUV anymore. And this spec gets a lot of things right, but it gets one major thing wrong, which I will reveal in today's video. But first I'll start by just saying I really like the way the Qashqai has grown up styling wise. Even in this sort of boring gray color, it's a nice looking car, and the ST Plus also gets 18s instead of 17s or 19s, so it all just starts to look very, very Goldilocks in that way. About right, not too flashy, not too boring. That's the Qashqai. We're gonna review it today. We'll start with the interior, but hit subscribe first. Chasing Cars, honest reviews of your next car. Brought to you by Budget Direct. Now, I do think it's worth going for the Qashqai ST Plus over the base model because you get some really nice upgrades, including this 12.3-inch touchscreen up here in the center, which looks really good and expensive, and it has wireless Apple CarPlay as well, which is the kind of connectivity we expect. But Android Auto, you'll still need a cable if you use an Android smartphone. Now, what you don't get is a big screen in front of you, just a 7-inch color screen, but that works absolutely fine, and the mechanical dials still look quite handsome and crisp. But if you go beyond this car, if you go up to a TI, you will get a big 12-inch screen in front of you as well, but I just don't think you need it. Now, a 41.5 grand drive away, it is a bit surprising. We still have like manual air conditioning, single zone. Again, higher end Qashqais will go to climate control, but you know, it's just another one of those things where you may not really need it. One thing I do love about this car is that it has cloth seats. Far too many relatively entry grade variants of cars in 2023 use vinyl seats, which are shocking in a warm climate like Australia. Cloth seats, they regulate temperature far better, and these ones are reasonably good. Side to side bolstering's quite good. You're not sliding around too much, but unlike some European options in this segment, you don't get infinite backrest adjustment, so you've got to find these sort of staggered settings to get comfortable, which isn't as perfect, but you know what? It's okay. Steering wheel is where we have a big problem, and that's because even though this car is 41.5 grand drive away, the steering wheel is plastic, or urethane, as Nissan calls it, which is plastic. It just feels cheap and nasty. I'm sorry, but it does. Even the base model, there's zero excuse in the year 2023 for the Qashqai to have a plastic steering wheel, but for the level 2 car, the step above the base model to have a plastic wheel is appalling. I'm so disappointed by that. That must change. And if it did change, then the ST Plus would actually be a really great Qashqai specification. Let me know down below in the comments if you agree with me or if you think I'm nuts. Now, we've got some storage here in front of the shifter, also plastic. We've got cup holders, and we've got a bin between the seats with a USB-C and a USB-A port. Plus, door bins, which can fit a bigger water bottle. So up front, largely very good, except that. Let's check out the back seat. Well, to be honest with you, it's good and bad back here in the second row of the Qashqai. The fact is, not that many people will actually use this vehicle for carrying people in the back. In Australia, small SUVs are often the vehicles of singles or couples or maybe people with pets. The Nissan X-Trail is a better fit if you actually want to use the back seat, but it's a shame because the Qashqai has grown in size and the space on offer back here is good. Headroom, excellent. Legroom, pretty good. Tow room, not bad. There's two big problems. The first one is that the seat base is really flat, and that means that your legs are just unsupported. The other thing you can do is try and splay them, but it's even too low for that to be comfortable. Plus, there's a lot of unexpected intrusion from the door here, so you're kind of sitting in a relatively odd, narrow space in the outboard seat. It's just not comfortable, and this obviously didn't get enough thought back here. But you do get air vents, you do get another USB-C and USB-A port back here, harsh materials on most of the door, but at least you get a soft armrest, and you get a flip-down armrest with two shallow cup holders. But one really good point, look how wide the doors open. So fitting a child seat back here is going to be possible, but it's not going to be all that comfortable for the front passenger if you've got a rear-facing child seat because the legroom is just not that good. Moving around the back of the Qashqai now, this vehicle just reminds us of why the styling is quite right. It's just not too loud, it doesn't stand out too much, it's just handsome and subtle, and I think that's something that this vehicle is really quite good at. It does have the Qashqai lettering on the back, and it also doesn't say the grade, so you're not advertising that you went for the second from the bottom, which is nice. Now, you don't get a power tailgate at this money, but it's still nice and easy to open up, and it's pretty big, 429 litres. It does have a bit of an unfortunate hump in the floor at the back there, but apart from that, it's a relatively practical space with a 12-volt socket, a little bit of cubbies off to the left and right, and you even get a space saver spare. I say even because so much of the time these days we're finding cars have no spare wheel at all, so even a space saver now is something, isn't it? Well, what's it going to cost you to run a Nissan Qashqai? This is one area where Nissan Australia needs to do a bit of work because this vehicle is too expensive to service. A prepaid 5-year 75,000 servicing plan for the Qashqai will set you back way beyond what a Toyota Corolla Cross, for instance, or a Skoda Kamiq or Karoq would cost you to service in this segment. So a bit more homework to do there, but fuel economy is not so bad. The Qashqai does require 95 octane premium petrol, which is a bit more expensive than your run-of-the-mill 91. The claim is 6.1 litres per 100 kilometres. In my mixed driving, I've got about 8, which for a small SUV is actually quite good. This segment is generally pretty bad on fuel economy, and in lots of this car's rivals, you'll see 9 or 10. Of course, if you go for a hybrid from one of the competitors, you will do better. And speaking of hybrid, there is a Qashqai e-Power hybrid coming out in Australia kind of soon, but it's obviously going to be more expensive than this car, and the fuel savings are yet to be seen. In terms of insurance, over the last 12 months, the median budget direct customer spent $894 to comprehensively insure a new Nissan Qashqai. Everybody's premium will vary based on things insurers take into account, like where you live, how you garage the car, and your driving history. And lastly, the warranty, 5 years, unlimited kilometers. So what's it like driving the Qashqai ST Plus? Well, on the whole, it's actually pretty good. This car is not the cheapest in segment, but it's also far from the most expensive these days. And one thing Nissan has got right is they've moved the Qashqai to a more modern engine, which works really well for this vehicle, and it's a lot nicer to drive than the old Qashqai because of it. It's not a hybrid and it's not the most fuel efficient car out there, but again, a bit like the price, it kind of just falls in the middle of the segment, which is, you know, going to be good enough, especially if you like the way the Nissan looks and is packaged inside, and I tend to like both of those things. So what am I on about? Well, under the bonnet, we've got a 1.3 litre turbocharged direct injected petrol 4-cylinder engine. It makes 110 kilowatts of power and 250 Newton meters of torque. And this is an engine that we see from time to time because it's used in a bunch of Renault-Nissan Alliance small cars, and it's actually also used in the entry-level versions of the Mercedes-Benz A-Class, B-Class, GLA and GLB, so it gets a bit of airtime. But this engine is normally disappointing because it's normally paired with a relatively mediocre dry dual clutch automatic. Now, Nissan have very intelligently dodged that by going for a CVT. I know it's not very often that we say the CVT is better than some other choice, but Nissan have got their CVT to like a reasonably okay position in terms of drivability, and CVTs normally respond better to engines with torque, and this car's got plenty of torque. 250 Newton meters at low RPMs is good, and the CVT works just fine as a result. In fact, you only need quite small throttle applications, and if you dive into the throttle, the Qashqai can feel quite peaky. It's actually not the engine, it's actually the transmission doing that, because the CVT fires so quickly to where this car has all of its torque available that you can get quite a shove in the back unexpectedly. So you learn to have very fine motor control on your right foot and just put in little bits of throttle, because the Qashqai actually feels quite effortless around town, actually quite powerful and punchy, which is really nice. And because it's a turbo, you don't have to rev the thing out, which means the engine stays quite a lot less loud and coarse than heaps of other options in this segment, which typically use non-turbo engines. So engine, transmission, Nissan have done a good job. I'm happy with that. What about the ride and handling? Well, that's where things become more of a mixed bag. The Qashqai actually has really nice handling. It's actually quite sporty, quite spirited. It's got very little body roll, and the steering is actually nice and natural. I like where they've landed. It's middle weighted, the ratio is not too fast or too slow. It's actually one of those kind of satisfying cars to just drive around and do errands, and it feels very European, which is not a mistake because this car is made in the UK, which is no longer a country in Europe, but it's exported in bulk to Europe, and it's really attuned for European tastes more than American or anything like that. So it feels more like a European small SUV, and that's good because Australian tastes often favour this kind of dynamic. But in order to get the handling to feel quite spirited, quite sporty, quite flat, Nissan engineers have stiffened up the suspension quite a bit, and you can tell. Now, this is a bit of a Goldilocks spec, this car, because we've got 18-inch wheels here, which are not too big, so they help the ride quality a bit. It's not as comfy as the base model on 17s, but the 17-inch wheels on the base model look a bit rental car spec. But then once you go beyond the ST Plus, you're on 19-inch wheels, and the ride on those wheels is pretty bad, actually, as I mentioned when I reviewed this car when it first came out. So the 18s, nice compromise. But it is still a pretty stiff and firm ride, and you'll find yourself going through some expansion joints and potholes and going, geez, that's just it's a bit much, it's a bit stiffer than it needs to be. And you know, competitors like a Skoda Kamiq, which is a bit smaller, a BYD Atto 3, which is fully electric, maybe a Toyota Corolla Cross, those cars are all a bit more comfy, a bit more supple than this vehicle, but I don't think it's a deal breaker by any stretch. I think it's pretty much fine on these 18s. Refinement, it's okay. There is a bit of road noise in this car, but it's not terrible. Visibility's good, and the safety systems are reasonable. That you have to spend more money than this. You have to go to the next variant up to get the full Nissan ProPilot suite, but we still have adaptive cruise control here on this car, which is good. We still have active lane keeping assist and blind spot monitoring. So it really just all comes down to that one disappointing bit about this particular Qashqai spec, doesn't it? And that disappointment is seriously the plastic steering wheel. I know, in the scheme of things of the whole world, not the biggest disappointment, but at 41.5 grand drive away, I don't want the thing that I touch the most when interacting with this car to be fairly down market plastic. If an MG4 can be fully electric at 38,990 with a leather wheel, the Qashqai has no excuse above 40 grand. Fix that, and the ST Plus will become that true Goldilocks Qashqai specification that would be so easy to recommend. But for now, you have to step up to the STL, and that means taking 19-inch wheels, it means downgrading the ride quality, and of course it means spending a lot more money, and that's disappointing. Especially when this car gets so many other things right. I like the styling, the packaging, the interior, the engine, and most of the dynamics as well. It's definitely an improvement on the older car. Just that wheel, hey. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. While you're there, hit subscribe, hit that notification bell, and as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.